You see, there are certain general Western ideas about India that are not quite correct, like, you know, Hinduism is caste, holy caste, and nothing but caste. Very many Westerners think that, but still they don't care. Whereas it is Indians that talk about, oh, you should care. You see, this is human rights concern, and so on and so on. And so it's mostly Indians who do this. Now, I mean, you all know the examples. Like, for example, Rajdeep Sardesai, you know, fulminated against Sadhvi Pragya, saying something that, you see, every Hindu should keep his kitchen knife sharpened to defend himself. Well, okay, I think it was a silly statement to make, because he should have known that this would be used by the enemy. But nevertheless, it's just a statement, you know, just talking over tea, you know, and venting your opinion. Whereas there are also statements that have consequences, like Mohammed Zubair and many other active Muslims have reacted to the Nupur Sharma event, which initially started with an insult to Shiva by Taslim Rehmani, and so hers was only an answer to that, which was not an insult, which is just quoting from the Islamic sources. And so then she received death threats. She's still underground. But more than that, 7 people, no less, who have expressed sympathy for her position have been murdered because of this slogan that was spread, Gustakh-e Rasul ki ek hi saza, sartan se juda. For the insult of the Prophet, there is only one punishment: sever the head from the trunk. And so some have been killed by more modern methods, but I think 3 of them have actually been beheaded. Okay? So that's far more serious. But I've never heard Rajdeep Sardesai fulminating and stuff. So I mean, it's very obvious, you see. Whereas Sadhvi Pragya's statement made it all the way to the BBC, where you see it now, you know, serves as extra proof that the Hindus have a big genocidal design against the Muslims. I can tell you, in 1995 and 96, twice I was in the United States at some Indological conferences, and all kinds of big professors who ought to know better, you see, in the expectation of a soon election win by the BJP, said, yeah, and if the BJP comes to power, they're going to throw all the Muslims into the Indian Ocean. Well, you see, the BJP has been in power for 6 plus 8 years, and I haven't heard of that. Like the CAA agitation lasted for months, and you know, to make sure, I looked it up on Wikipedia. That's a very pro-Muslim, anti-Hindu source. Well, it had 0 deaths. That's not entirely true, because several Hindus have been killed. But at any rate, in the Muslim community, you know, it went, you know, it was uneventful. So this genocide by Hindus, I don't see it happen. But yeah, I mean, the media are biased about that. We totally agree.
Dr. Elst, my question is, see, we are actually overtaking China in terms of population in a couple of years. So also there is a significant growth in terms of minority population as well. So when we see that in terms of most populous country and the population increase in terms of minority as well, there we see that already we are seeing the demographic changes which is happening in India because of the minorities being more in certain areas and then the persecution happening on them.
Mm-hmm.
So the thing is, in next 50 years or 100 years, if the Hindu Dharma has to survive, how would you see that, how we can overcome this problem where the demographic changes are happening and the persecutions are being done, and at the same time, how we can overcome also on what is the future for this particular, for our Hindu Dharma to survive against the atrocities which are being done.
Just one,
Yeah. Well,
just one announcement. After this program, lunch is arranged. Please have the lunch and break. And the book which was released today is available for sale. The MRP is 120 rupees. Today it is available for 100 rupees. Those who are interested, they can buy the book. And this is the last question. After the answer, Dr. Harish will be speaking, and it will be concluded by Rohit Chakatirtha.
yes, and if you buy the book, the writer happens to be present to autograph it. Well, what to do? Well, if you look at the demographic evolution, it's obvious. India will be a Muslim majority state before the end of the century. And if you want to know the fate of a minority in a Muslim state, look at Bangladesh. So, yeah. So that's the answer, you see, using the figures that exist. Some people, believe in demographic warfare, which may be effective. It's not a ridiculous idea. In Israel, you see, I remember Shimon Peres as the prime minister saying on TV that every Jewish family should have at least 4 children. Now, recently, a Christian bishop in Kerala said the same thing. Because they noticed that they are being overtaken by the Muslims in a very big way. The latest figures, the birth figures in Kerala said that the 26% of the population who are Muslim are having 42% of the new births. Okay, so it's going very fast. Now, in the case of Hindus, I don't expect anything from that kind of demographic warfare, because Hindus are not militant enough to do it. You see, even if they were given that instruction, they wouldn't do it anyway. And so I know quite a few Kashmiri Pandits, and they mostly have 1 child, or no children, or at the very, very, very most, then they really deserve applause, they have 2 children, which means that their population is decreasing rather fast. So this seems to be the Hindu attitude. And so you're going to disappear. Unless in Kerala, there is now quite a big movement of ex-Muslims. And they put their own videos on YouTube and so on. They build quite a case against Islam. They give ever more reasons for, disowning Islam. This is in parallel with what is happening in the West. You see, the media won't publicize it, but it is happening. And quite a few young Muslims are quitting. So this may happen in India also. It's more difficult in India. First of all, where you have large Muslim communities that are not held in check by the authorities, it's dangerous to apostatize. And so not so many people will do that. Moreover, more than in Pakistan or Bangladesh, in India you also have this polarized situation that the Muslim community feels it has to stand together against the hostile outside world. So that makes it even more difficult to leave the community. But nevertheless, I think it will happen in India also. Because you see, the same technological factor is there. You see, in any family, no matter how radical and so on, someday you see this adolescent son is sitting behind his computer, quickly going to this ex-Muslim website, seeing what is there. And so this is a totally new situation. And so I think ultimately that that disintegration of Islam from the inside is inevitable. Right now, the government or so is not supporting this, but it's happening anyway. And indeed, you see, in the larger picture, you could say that it's a good thing that the government is not supporting it, or that the government, for instance, is not paying for these books. You know, it's better like that. You see, nobody can say, oh yeah, this is just to please the government or so. No, it's an authentic independent company. And you see, in the battle of the 10 kings in the Rig Veda, the Vedic king Sudas wins the battle. Now, why is this? You see, partly he's a strategic genius, but partly also he's just lucky. He should have lost that battle if you see what the circumstances are, yet he won. Why did he win? Well, according to his court priest Vasishta, the reason is that he, Vasishta, wrote such beautiful, heart-rending hymns to Indra, so that Indra was moved to support Sudas in the battle. See? So if you guys continue to do all these yajnas and pujas and so on, I'm very sure that the mind of many Muslims will be turned in the right direction. Oh, yeah, right. Two practical questions. How to reclaim the Kashi Vishwanath temple? Should Indra be renamed Bharata? Well, let's start with the first. I think we're on the way to reclaiming the Kashi Vishwanath. That is already happening. The discovery of the Shiva Lingam also helped, of course. And it's similar in Mathura, where also there are circumstances that surprisingly help the Hindu cause. Like you see the Places of Worship Act 1991, which in principle would forbid any change of status of the site, turns out not to apply to the case of Mathura for difficult juridical reasons. It's going to happen. I mean, how it's going to happen, I don't know yet. But you see, this is coming back. In general, I must say that I am rather skeptical before this movement to reclaim temples. You should, of course, reclaim temples from the government, those that are seized by the government and plundered. But you see, in those places where temples have been replaced by mosques, what you should concentrate on, and so there are a few symbolic places like Kashi Vishwanath where this does not apply, but in general, you should concentrate not on bringing back the temples, but on bringing back your fellow compatriots who have been abducted into Islam. You should get the Muslims back, and then they will bring their places of worship back. Then the other thing, should Indra be Bharata? No. You see, Indra is a religious category. You can worship Indra anywhere where you have thunder and lightning. And so he's gone to the west. You see Zeus and Jupiter and Donar and so on. They're all the same thing as Indra.
What you meant is,
yeah.
Should India be renamed as
Okay. No, but you see, where I was going to is, you have in Varanasi this Bharat Mata Mandir, opened by Mahatma Gandhi, and so I'm against that. You see, here, in that respect, I'm a Muslim. I don't think you should worship Bharat Mata. Bharat Mata is a nice way of talking about India. You see, in the 19th century, nationalist movements in Europe, you had the same thing. You had these depictions of Britannia, also as a woman. Yeah, that's a manner of speaking. But so now, as for renaming India, that I find, I mean, you people have a tendency to focus on the small things and forget about the big things. You see, the people in Germany, they don't live in Germany but in Deutschland. And the people in China, they live in Zhongguo. And yet, whenever they have to speak English, they will refer to their country as China and as Germany. You see, that is just a fact, you have this translation. So there's nothing wrong with India. And in Hindi texts, or I suppose it's in the same thing in Canada, you already use Bharat. And so there are no reasons specifically to use it in English. You can, I mean, like I came here through Istanbul in Turkey. There I noticed that even in English texts, they still call Turkey Türkiye, in Turkish. So it's not unique, but I find it, wasted effort. Moreover, it so happens that the word India is of Indian origin. You see, it's the Persian and then Greek pronunciation, ultimately Sindhu. So what's wrong with it?
Last two questions.
Last one, or last two? Oh, last three. Okay. Current trends in Europe about Christianity. Well, you see, that's very simple. Christianity is in terminal decline. When I grew up, everybody in my class went to church every Sunday. Now only very, very, very few people go. When my mother died earlier this year, there was no priest to do the funeral mass. And so many churches are like the church where I was in the church choir. That church is now the swimming pool of the school next door. And so some churches become mosques. Be careful. Now, is there, because of the de-Christianization, is there an attraction, the questioner asks, for the Indic religions? Yes, but not entirely. I think most people just become unreligious. And you see, this mostly happens when they're in their teens. And so at that age, you just happen to be rather unreligious. And then later, when you're 50 or so, then religion comes back. So you see, among the religious alternatives, of course, India is the biggest on offer. And so most other things people try are poor compared to that. Like there is a rise of neo-paganism, that is to say, of the rediscovery of the old religion, the pre-Christian religion of their own country. Now, I am all for that, and indeed, at the suggestion of Ram Swarup, I have involved myself in this movement in my own country. But, at the same time, I have to say, and this is also from experience, from seeing what people do, you see, ultimately, privately, they also take yoga classes and so on. And so, for mythology, for what you get from the Puranas, they indeed go back to the Edda or to Greek mythology and so on. But you see, when it comes to deeper things, that influx from Asia is still there. Not only from India, it's also Tibetan, Thai, Chinese, Japanese. But you see, that influx is predominant. And so, what the West invents usually is plagiarized from that. Like you have this Eckhart Tolle with his brand of mysticism. Now that's just, what's it called, mindfulness, which is Vipassana, which is a particular branch of Buddhism. So you see, some people are a bit too proud to take something from the East, so they take something from the West, which is simply a renaming of something imported from the East. Then,
Just 1 second.
yeah?
The triggering point for that
Time
question
ಇಲ್ಲ.
was, the Western funding to anti-Hindu activities.
ಅಲ್ಲ ಸಬ್ ಕ್ವಶನ್
Yeah,
ಎರಡು ಕ್ವಶನ್
yeah, Western funding to anti-Hindu activities.
ಎರಡು ಕ್ವಶನ್
Well, okay. Can you share, is there truth in the notion of love jihad? Well, yes, I mean, it's not me saying so. It's not even the Hindu doctorate saying so. The first, I think, who alerted society about this were the Christian bishops in Kerala. They have quite large love jihad in Kerala. And then we have reports about the same phenomenon in England. you know, where Sikh girls and Hindu girls and, well, Sikhs are Hindus, of course, but Jewish girls and so on are all targeted. Nobody is safe. So this phenomenon of love jihad is very well attested. And those in Indian papers and TV stations and so on who deny it or who lampoon it, they're thoroughly wrong. Right? But so, I mean, you know all that, you check the newspapers. I mean, the newspapers, of course, are only to a limited extent a source. For like raw data, they're a good source. For interpretation of those data, they're of course a different story. Like, for instance, you have the cases where the names of the perpetrator or the victim are changed and the communal identity is hidden. You have to take that into account. But so the facts are very clear, yes. About the Ashoka chakra, yes, it says it contains the 24 giant Tirthankaras. Well, you know, you have to see that 24 is a sacred number. So about the history of the giant Tirthankaras, there is a lot of debate. We know that the 23rd Parshvanath is definitely a historical figure. Before that, it becomes doubtful. I've been to the birthplace temple in Ayodhya of Adinath, of Urshabadeva, which, you know, might well be his birthplace. You know, Ayodhya being the capital city of the solar dynasty, so, you know, east of the Ganga, it was the most important city in that area, so he might well have been born there. Then again, a certain Jijit Nadumuri Rawi, who lives here in Bangalore, has just written a book about the geography of the Ramayana. He says, okay, Rama lived at the last part of the Rig Veda, like the 10th mandala, about that same period. And he was only the second or third generation to live in Ayodhya. So he confirms what was, you know, discussed in the Ayodhya debate, that Rama was indeed born in Ayodhya, in present-day Ayodhya. However, that he was not born in the palace of the age-old solar dynasty, because their capital had changed several times. And so Manu lived a lot closer to where Manu was supposedly landed after the flood in Manali in Himachal. So, you know, the original capital of the solar dynasty is far more to the west, and it changed several times. Even Dasharatha is known, according to the Ramayana itself, to have changed, moved populations and stuff. So, so to say that Urshabadeva, who is supposed to have lived in the early Rigvedic period, was born there, is probably something made up afterwards, when there was already the belief, oh, this is the age-old Ikshvaku capital. So, I mean, this is not very sure. You see, these are the first things that a historian should think, you know, here, maybe, maybe not. But you see, if the construction of 24 Tirthankaras is artificial, which is probable, then it's logical that they chose 24. Because 24 is a sacred number. 24 is also the number of syllables in the Gayatri. And in the Indo-European world, you find the number 24 again and again. The runic alphabet has 24 letters. Ordered just like the Gayatri mantra, 3 times 8. And so on. So yes, you see, this 24 is an important number in Jainism, in the Vedas, in Buddhism. But at any rate, it's a very, very good choice to put in the Indian flag. And finally, no, that's it. There was one more question here somewhere.
What is the end for this Aryan and Dravidian debate, sir?
Yeah, the Aryan-Dravidian debate is a big mistake. I'm not going to retell quickly the whole homeland debate, which is in a which is fast advancing at the moment. But okay, you see there exists Indo-European language. That language family is absolutely, real. And so the North Indian people speak a different language, differences going back more than 10,000 years from the South Indian people. That's true. So, but again, that's only the language they speak. You are one culture with the people in North India. Whatever the language you speak. You see, this is a very artificial problem in India. In Europe in the 19th century, there was a lot of talk about the racial implications of the Aryan theory and so on. That's totally finished. First, because it became indecent to care about it after 1945, but also simply because linguistic insights have advanced. And you see, language and genes or bones or so are different things. The Jamaicans are black, but they speak English, which is an Indo-European language. So it has no importance. So in India, outsiders think, oh, these ugly, vicious Hindutva people with their out of India theory, how much importance they attach to it. No, you see, it's the other way around. You see, Hindus only pay attention to this because their enemies do. You see, the people with the Aryan invasion theory, it is they who say, and I quote Mallikarjuna Kharge, you Aryans don't belong in India. Now, what a ridiculous statement. You see, in India you have all kinds of newcomers, like the Parsis are only here for like 1200 years. The Nagas in Nagaland are here even less. They're not Adivasis or something. They're here for only 1000 years. Invaders from Thailand. And so the Jats, for example, are Scythian invaders. Yes. You see, the word Jat is the same as the word Getai. In Greek sources you have the Massa Getai. And so they stretch all the way to Romania. So what? Does anybody doubt the Indianness of the Jats? So you see, this is totally artificial. Nobody normally would care. And indeed, you see, in other countries they don't care. Like, for instance, the Romanian state, consisting of these Scythian invaders who have been Romanized by the Roman invaders. Well, they are nationalists. Every square, every city in Romania has a square named after Emperor Trajanus, who Romanized them. Then, the worst example, of course, is America, where most of the people are there for maybe 300 years or 100 years, and still they are American nationalists. So what's the problem? So it's not the non-believers in the Aryan invasion theory, it is the believers in the Aryan invasion theory who make so much out of this. Yes. And then there was one last question. Okay? Okay.
This is the mark of any good program, that there will be a lot of questions and debates. This is also the tradition of Indian knowledge system. So now, as the organizers have requested, I have to say a few words, and after that Rohit Chakratirtha will tell his opinions, his remarks to conclude, and we will conclude the morning session for the day. I think Sitaram Goel, in his book How I Became a Hindu, he quotes about how he met Dr. Koenraad Elst before he was doctor. He was searching for a few books. Then when he wanted more books, then somebody referred Koenraad Elst to Sitaram Goel. Sitaram Goel was not a scholar in the regular use of the term. Though he was an MA in history, he was not a PhD in history. He was not a professor in history. but he changed the course of Indian history. If today we are standing, including Bhairappa's Avarana, he is indebted immensely, without any doubt, to the original sources of Sitaram Goyal and Ram Swarup-ji. And of course, other writers including David Foley, Koenraad Elst, K.S. Lal and all. I would not have standing here if there was no Sitaram Goyal. But the beauty of Indian society is that we forget our gurus. I must say that. Because there are so many acharya, there are so many bodies. Mythic Society has taken up task and they have conducted seminars on Sitaram Goyal. I'm very happy. But across India, in the year 2020, forget about COVID, there were chances to do online programs. Except for few programs in which Dr. Elst participated online, there were not much, and some by Jaipur Raila. So there was not much uproar, there was not much garjaning about Sitaram Goyal, a person like a lion in the field of knowledge. He came and he conquered, in the real sense of the term, the Indian history, but we are yet to acknowledge it. Today people like Romila Thapar are not so confident to speak about Aryan invasion theory. That is the single dedicated work done by this non-profit organization or a publication called Voice of India. They are not funded by any government, either left or right or center. With what difficulty? He was a cloth merchant. So this is a dedication, my speech is a dedication for 2-3 minutes to Sitaram Goyal. If Dr. Elst is there here, it is because of Sitaram Goyal. He will definitely agree. Because whatever he went back after the Ayodhya trip and all, then Sitaram Goyal asked him to produce a manuscript, and within no time he quotes Sitaram Goyalji, the child prodigy about Dr. Elst. He says in this book, because I can remember each and every line written by Sitaram Goyal, either in Hindi or in English. That much I have dedicated my eyes to Sitaram Goyal. So he came and he gave a not new perspective. Basically, he gave a new perspective. It is the story of valor. Indian history is the story of valor. It is the story of knowledge. It is the story of giving back. It is the story of asking questions. It is the story of I differ with you. That right now there was a debate about the concept of sati. So that is the way the Hindus or the Indians will do. So that tradition was revived without the help of UGC, without the help of planning commission, without the help of any other regular government bodies. That shows that till that bija, that germination seed somewhere exists in the Indian consciousness, which time and again is ready to come up and take its new avatars. But only that we should be there to receive it. So therefore, this program reminds me of all that. And Ram Swarup is such a yogi, who is a very important yogi cum scholar after Sri Aurobindo. Very clearly I am telling after reading Aurobindo's all the works, more than 35 volumes. He has written many books. I recommend one book, it is Hinduism, on Hinduism. On Hinduism, in that the first chapter is there. He has literally meditated, done dhyana on the very crisis of Hinduism and Hindutva and Hindu people. And he has given aphorisms, like sutras, I think 45 or less than 50. What it means to be a Hindu, what it means to be Hindutva, what is the core of Hinduism, all that he has codified in less than 50 paragraphs. If we are scholars and seekers of knowledge and Ananda and Jnana, if we take each paragraph and work in that direction, we can produce what not. That much of knowledge is given by Rishi, Ram Swarup, in seed form. So these are the two people. They used to say when understanding through Islam through Hadith and another one on the meaning. There's a book called The Word. When he has written that book, Ram Swarup, it's all about our devatas. 1,000 names of Vishnu, 1,000 names of Durga, Kali. It's a wonderful book actually. One must read it. And also his treatment of Islam and Christianity from the Hindu yogic point. Hindu view of Islam and Christianity. It is purely written from yogic viewpoint. It's a wonderful contribution to Indian philosophy, Hindu philosophy. But our philosophy departments are till now unaware of it actually. Means being a Hindu who knows more than prayers, dhyana, meditation, how Islam looks like to me, how Christianity looks like to me from my perspective. That is given by the person who practices yoga. When Sitaram Goel has done with Stalins and Maos and whatnot, Lenins, then Ramswarup advises him to do a kind of Visarjana of the Asuri Shaktis. Visarjana. We do the voice of India, externally it was in a re-establishing the truth about history. Internally it was in a yogic resurrection, in the real sense of the term, which we are not able to recognize still now. And few books are already published in Kannada, but not of Dr. Koenraad Elst. Just to conclude, there are many nice books, wonderful books written by Sitaram Goel in the today's context of Hindu Dharmic wars. Perversion of India's political parallels. It's a book written, just a small booklet, we can say just 65 pages. In that, with index, all the books of the Voice of India will be with index, either 40 pages or 100 pages. Means how meticulously they have done the work and the evidence which exists within the text. He says in this article, in one of the articles, Sitaram Goel, about the place of Mahatma Gandhi. As Dr. Elst was mentioning about the place of Ashoka and Buddha, normally it will blur our vision about entire Indian history sometimes. Here, when the question comes to take on the Islam and Christianity in its real true colors, right now we have completed Christmas and New Year yesterday, right? So then comes the figure of Gandhiji. So that is the point. He has made a very, very balanced, very truthful analysis. Of course, there was a difference, intellectual difference between Sitaram Goel and Ramswarup as far as Gandhiji was concerned. Even with Dr. Elst and Sitaram Goel. Means the newer and newer generation, they are having more and more distance with the Gandhian thought process. So, in this article, the place of Mahatma Gandhi, because this is the one single question or one signal question, not addressing, we will not be able to talk directly about Hindutva or Hinduism. Because it is again and again it comes. Here, the name of the article is Place of Mahatma Gandhi. I request everyone to read this one, particularly this article. Here he says that however is the story of Hindu society in its centuries-old encounters with Islam, means we have understood Islam in a very wrong way, means it is not only the problem of Gandhiji, it is also the problem of Hindu society at large. He quote Sitaram Goel, Hindu society has always viewed Islam through the eyes of its own spiritual traditions. We have a wonderful Jain, Buddhist, Vedic traditions. We are all very meditative people, very dharmic people. We view everything from the point of our own dharmic viewpoint, our own dhyana or yoga perspective. Islam had shown its full face to Hindu society quite early, not only in devil dance of its swordsmen, but also in the pronouncements of and prolific writings of its mullahs, Sufis, and historians. But Hindu society had all along failed. Please mark the words, failed to draw the right conclusions. None of our acharyas, till Swami Dayananda Saraswati, has spoken about Islam. It's already documented by Sitaram Goel in his book Hindu-Muslim, Hindu-Christian Encounters. But Hindu society had all along failed to draw the right conclusions. It had continued to regard Islam as a religion. Religion. The folly has persisted till the present time, particularly in what passes for a Hindu movement. Till today, when there is a rise in the Hindu movement, there is a voice for the Hindutva movement, still our ignorance about Islam is unpardonable. We will pay for it. We are going to pay for it as the days are rolling. Because this is no longer a spiritual or an intellectual debate. This is a real-time debate. This is a real-time happening. The Nupur Sharma case or the other cases which are very evidently, every day they are showing it. Therefore, we have to really, something like what Bertrand Russell has done to Christianity. Why I am not a Christian? or on being agnostic. See, agnosticism also has a place in religion, in philosophical discussions. Nastikata has also a point in the religions, in the history of religion. Therefore, to create more and more non-believers within Islam. Why I am not a Muslim? There are books actually, Ibn Waraq and others have written books actually, Anwar Sheikh and all, but not by Indian people who reside in this geography. If we are not going to do, not going to increase, already he has told about the rise in Hindu population, which is a distant possibility. So this is the real context of the Hindus. When we say, people like me or people like him or others, people say, no, don't act like doomsday sayers. Our society is so glorious. Our society has come back. It has resurrected. Please remember, all the story was good before the advent of Islam. Now the Islamic forces, they are rising in Europe. England has become already Londonistan. The mayor, including the mayor. They are doing the mass prayers in Trafalgar Square. So the situation is not so rosy as we Hindus who are sitting in Dharmakshetra and talking. The world has become Kurukshetra for the Hindus. Thank you. Hey, sir.
Yeah, the Sitaram girl you're talking about, he actually makes a very critical point about Gandhi in the history of Hindu-Christian encounters. At the end of the section on Gandhi, he says, so in spite of the Mahatma's great characteristics and so on, his failure to understand Christianity fully, he makes a very critical point.
I must congratulate Mythic Society for conducting this very meaningful New Year morning. Though we don't 100% believe in this Gregorian calendar New Year, but still it's a very good, meaningful morning. I congratulate Dr. G.B. Harish for writing this book, Bodhika Kshatriyaru, and also I congratulate Dr. Elst for giving a very thought-provoking seminar lecture on culture wars. Dr. Elst is already famous for giving away the hypothesis. Rather than hypothesis, I can call it as a theory. It's out of India theory. You must be knowing about it. Aryans have not invaded or they have not come to India. It is Indians who had gone abroad with their culture. They have taken Indian culture to all the countries, including Japan and China. So he has very prominently articulated this theory, and he has been telling about this for, I think, the last 3-4 decades. He has been continuously telling about this. But the sad point is, even today in our textbooks, we are still reading about Aryan invasion. We are still reading about the Arya-Dravida conflict. So we need to introspect. Somebody from outside India is telling that Indians are the ones who have given this culture to all these countries, and the people in India are still believing that somebody from outside had brought culture to this country. So we need to really question ourselves and need to change our textbooks. He is the one who shaped the thoughts of L.K. Advaniji. In fact, Advaniji used to keep a copy of his book, Saffron Swastika. Many of us may be knowing about it. He was deeply influenced by Elst's work. In fact, even that Babri Masjid conflict or Rath Yatra, all those things were shaped by Saffron Swastika, which was written by Dr. Elst. He used to openly tell about this in many programs. He used to talk about Hindu awakening and all that. So in today's lecture, Dr. Elst has talked a lot about various points about Indian culture. He talked about Punarjanma, rebirth. He talked about Purusha Sukta, and then he gave the real meaning of pagan. Many of us still think pagan was something primitive, something that was before culture. So this Christianity and Islam came and they reformed this paganism. They gave a new face to paganism. I think Swami Vivekananda was the first one to identify that it was not Christianity that gave or that reformed paganism. He has very clearly told it's completely wrong to tell that Christianity within 300 years changed the entire Europe. It's actually Greek and Roman civilization, whatever good items were there, good things were there, they had been taken by Christianity and they were given different names, including Maria, including the names of various saints. All those things have been taken directly from Greek and Roman civilization and they have been used in different color, in a different way. So it's not actually, paganism was completely eradicated or it was completely removed. It was given a different color, different shape, different form. Whatever good we find in today's religions, all those good items have been taken directly from paganism. This was told by Vivekananda, this was identified by Ramswarup, and Ramswarup has immensely, extensively has written about religious forms, how Christianity and Islam has changed the world, what they have done, what kind of attack they have made on Hindu Dharma, Sanatana Dharma, Bharatiya Dharma, and how they have infiltrated Indian culture. I normally use the word parasite. So these religious things are, I mean, if you know the basic ideas of parasites, you know how they behave. So religion behaves the same way. In the initial stages, you feel it is helping you. Only after a certain stage, you will understand that it was eating the main thing. So this is doing the same thing to Indian culture. When it came to India, we were all thinking that it is another dharma, just like Indian dharma, Bharatiya dharma. This is also another dharma. So we need to build churches and mosques for them. This was the mentality of Indians. And we had done that. We had built the prayer halls for them. But later what has happened, we have all seen that. Today Dr. Elst has given a lot of elements to think. He has touched upon different items like the history of abortion, the history of sati, and what is the opinion of Bharatiya Sanskriti on homosexuality and euthanasia. What is the history of these things? And he also has mentioned about Savarkar. Savarkar did Atmarpana. He fasted for about 25 days, even without water, Nirahara Upavasa, and then he left his mortal body. But much before that, he had written an article on Atmarpana. So if he had not written that article, probably we would have all thought that it was a suicide. In that article, he had very clearly mentioned the difference between Atmarpana and Atmahatya. Probably it's the shortest of all of his articles, probably about like 600 to 700 words. But in that small article, he had mentioned about like 35 people, Indian people, who had done Atmarpana. And then he says there is a great difference between Atmarpana and Atmahatya. Atmahatya is one when you are fearful, you are full of fear, right? So you don't know what to do next. You don't know how to face life. At that stage you do Atmahatya. But Atmarpana is something that you do when you have achieved everything in your life. You think there is nothing more that you can do with your mortal body. So you just leave your body and go away. So this is the kind of mental preparedness he had much earlier before his Atmarpana. Dr. Elst has mentioned about Savarkar and also about Vinoba Bhave. So he has, then he talked about Buddha, Ashoka. Probably some of us have read a lot of literature about Buddha and Ashoka, and also we have, some of us might have been understood that a lot of lot of distortion has happened in the writing of history. He also touched upon textbooks. He told, still we are reading the same old lies and biggest lies in textbooks. But here I need to mention a small thing. In Karnataka, we have done a small but significant change in our textbooks. For the first time in the history of textbooks, for the last 75 years there was nothing, no mention about Sanatana Dharma. But we have included one chapter on Sanatana Dharma, and in that we have given all the major details about Sanatana, major elements of Sanatana Dharma, be it literature, be it customs, be it the philosophy. Because all these years, whenever there was a mention about Hindu, it was always associated with something bad. Hindus they are indifferent to progress. They are intolerant. They are bad. They are cruel. So everything that is bad, that is negative, it was associated with Hindu, the word Hindu. But for the first time, we have written one chapter on Hinduism, and we have written all the major elements of Hinduism. We also have included Zoroastrian religion. All these years it was not there. Students were studying only about Islam and Christianity. But for the first time we have included Jews, because Judaism is the basic for, it is the starting point for Christianity. So we have included Judaism, and then we also have talked about Zoroastrianism. And then we have written something about the philosophy of Indian philosophy, be it Acharyas, three Acharyas, what they have given, what they have talked about. Because all these years, our students are learning only about the lives of Acharyas, but for the first time we have included some philosophy of Acharyas. So, without this philosophical background, probably we would not be able to have a good battle with the religions. Because religions, they don't have any philosophy. We all know they have certain tactics. They know how to win over you, but they lack philosophy. When Harish and I were coming in the morning, we were talking about the difference between Indian thinkers and the foreign thinkers. So I was asking Harish, what is the major difference between these two? Foreign thinkers, when they study Indian knowledge systems, when they read Indian literature, do they really understand Indian literature? I was just asking Harish, and he told yes or probably not, because yes, they have that intellectual capacity to understand Indian intellectual work. But at the same time, Indian intellectual work also has one more layer called emotion. We have something called Shraddha. See, for example, you may see a temple, you may understand the architecture of the temple, you may understand everything about the temple, the literature, the Alankar Shastra, the Aradhana, the Acharana, everything. But what about the Shraddha part? So do they really understand? So we were just discussing about that. Now, after listening to Dr. Elst's speech, I was thinking, probably if they don't have that layer, that emotional layer, that is good, because they would be able to see that the real intellect of Indian knowledge quite clearly. Because many a time what happens, this emotional layer comes in between and it will make our vision blur. So be it Dr. Elst or be it David Frawley or anybody from outside, they are seeing Indian system, Indian philosophy or Indian knowledge system without having any emotional layer. I think that is better. We also need to become more and more intellectual. That is why Ram Sarup was able to see the future of Hinduism. He was able to see the dangers of religions. So that is why we call him as Bhautika Kshatriya. So the book has been rightly titled Bhautika Kshatriya, because there is no element of manas there. Whenever we bring the element of manas or the emotions, there is a possibility that we get deviated from the main path. So we need to see the problems, we need to see the challenges, we need to see everything very clearly. That can happen only with the proper intellect. So it's a work of buddhi. So Ramswarup was in that sense truly, he was an intellectual, and he prepared his Shishya, Sitaram Goel. Sitaram Goel continued the battle for India. So he could elaborate the dangers of religion. He could see what will happen if Indians do not get right knowledge or the right weapons to fight the battle. And then he prepared one more Shishya, and that was Dr. Elst. So this is the Shishya Parampara. We have seen in our history that the changes will not happen by 100 people, not by 1000 people, not by a bigger crowd. You have about like 1000 people and 1000 people will do all the changes. No, it doesn't happen that way. Ramakrishna Paramahamsa had only one Shishya, and one Shishya could change the world. Sri Krishna had only one. He did not give his discourse to the entire Kurukshetra. He talked to only Arjuna. And that way, Ramswarup prepared Sitaram Goel, and Sitaram Goel prepared Dr. Elst. And that is how this Indian society has behaved all the, throughout the history. So I have to congratulate Dr. Elst for being so clear, being so direct. He was in fact more Bharatiya than many of us in many ways. So he told that he will not be, he will not call himself a Hindu, but in a broader way, broader meaning of Hindu being tolerant, Hindu being, Hindu being the person who has that samabhava, sarvadharma samabhava, who has that all good qualities about manaviyata. Probably in that way, he is a true Hindu, and he has been fighting. He has been a relentless fighter for the last 3-4 decades. He is fighting for India. He is fighting for us. He is fighting for Bharatiya Dharma. So in that way, he is more Bharatiya than many of us Bharatiyas. So I have to congratulate Dr. Elst for being a relentless warrior, a Bhaudika Kshatriya, and also for giving a thought-provoking lecture today on various elements on about cultural wars. See, he talked about other religions, but at the same time he also talked about the problems and the myopia problem of Hindus as well. He had been a very critical insider in the sense we in India we see many people who only point at others. So who is the problem for all this bad? It is them. Who is the problem for all this evil? It is them. So we are much interested in pointing at others, but we need to be introspective. We need to see ourselves and understand what are the shortcomings of Indians, what are the shortcomings of Hindus. So we need to introspect, and today's lecture was an opportunity for all of us to introspect, to see inside, to become more Hindus, to become fighters, Bhaudika Kshatriyas. So I'm very grateful to Dr. Elst for being with us, to come all the way to Bangalore to give a very thought-provoking lecture, and I call it a